this is Jo from Maths Tutor Me. Today we're going to do some equations and we're going to do some very simple quadratic equations. Now we're starting with the very simple ones because quadratic may very well be a very new term for you. Quadratic is the word used to describe any term that is squared. So something like x squared, when it has a squared on it, in an equation we call it a quadratic equation. So quadratic equations can have 1, 2, or no solutions. Sometimes there won't be any solutions. So we're used to the equations that we've been looking at in previous lessons in this series have all had one solution. But when we're doing quadratics, we can have 2 solutions or sometimes no solutions. So let's have a look. Let me show you how to do these questions. It says solve x squared equals 16. Now we see the x squared, so we know it's a quadratic. Now, like all of our equations, if we want to solve the equation, we want to get the pronumeral by itself. So I have an x squared, I want to get the x by itself. I want to get rid of the squared. Now the opposite of squaring something is to square root it. So I can get x by itself if I square root the 16. Okay, that's the opposite. Now the square root of 16, now you can type that in if you need to in your calculator. You can go square root, there's a square root button, 16. It is equal to 4. Okay, now there is a little catch though. X is not just equal to 4. We have been doing reverse steps here trying to get our answer, but we have to also think a little bit here in reverse. 4 squared will give me 16, but it could have also been a negative 4. So what we do is we write a little plus and a little minus in front of here because it could be a positive 4 or it could be a negative 4. If we squared it it would give us 16. And that will happen every time that you square root a number. It could be a positive or a negative solution. Now you may be a little bit going, why is this happening? If you have done Pythagoras' theorem before, you will have been used to square rooting numbers like this, but you only ever would have been concerned with the positive solution. That is because when you're doing Pythagoras' theorem, you can never have a negative length, a negative measurement. So we always automatically disregard the negative. But when we're just solving an equation, like this one here, it is very possible to have a negative solution. So you must remember that when you square root a number, it could be a positive or a negative. Okay, so you need to have both of those solutions. If you don't like writing it like this, it could also be written as x is equal to 4 or minus 4. But it's a longer way of writing it, so hopefully you will adjust to being able to write it like this. X is equal to a plus or minus 4. So that's actually 2 solutions to that equation. This equation here, x squared is equal to 0. Now to get rid of the squared, I want to square root the other side. So x would be equal to the square root of 0. But the square root of 0, if you type it in, is still 0. And you can't really have a plus or minus 0 because 0 is 0. There's no plus or minus about it. So this is the example of when you can just have one solution for a quadratic. Okay, so this one had 2 solutions, plus or minus 4. This equation just has one solution, which is 0. Question 3, x squared equals negative 4. So to get rid of the squared, I want to square root negative 4. Now, if you've ever tried to do something like that, let's type it in, square root of negative 4. My calculator comes up with something that says math error. because you cannot actually square root a number. This is when there is no solution. Okay, whenever there is a negative sign underneath your square root sign, it's not possible to get an answer. So we say that this equation has no solution. So we've seen all our different types here now. No solution, one solution, and two solutions. Most of the time though, like in the rest of these questions here, you'll find that you get two solutions. So let's keep going. Number 4, x squared is equal to 12.1. To get x by itself, I want to square root 12.1, and I'll remember the positive and negative of that. If I square root 12.1, oh, I get a decimal. So there's two different ways you can leave the answer. You can either leave it like this. This is called exact form. So this is actually one way of writing the answer. Exact form. Or sometimes you'll be asked to give a decimal answer. So this would be the first decimal answer. Let's do this to 2 decimal places. It would be 3.4. That would round up to become an 8. 3.48, positive or negative. Okay, so that is the decimal answer. Okay, so keep an eye out with questions that you get in your textbooks and tests. Do I want an exact answer? If I do, I have to leave it with the square root sign over the top. Or do I want the decimal answer? Let's try again for question 5. X squared equals 32. So to get rid of the squared, x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 32. Now, square root of 32 is, again, I get a decimal. So this is my exact answer. Or if I'm asked for a decimal, I would get plus or minus, let's do 2 decimal places again, 5.6, and that will round up again to be 6.6. And one last one, x squared is equal to 128. To get the x by itself, I need to square root the 128, and I need to remember the positive and negative. So square root of 128 equals a decimal again, so 11.31 plus or minus. Okay, exact form, decimal form. Okay, so they're not too tricky, but you just need to always remember the positive and negative sign. It's very easy to lose marks in tests for getting a minus sign somewhere. All right, let's turn over the page. So these are just short little questions. So I just have 4 little questions here for you to practice. Remember that if they are not exact answers at this stage while we're practicing, let's leave the exact answer and the decimal answer. So have a try of these 4 questions, pause the video and restart when you're ready to see how you went. Question 1, w squared equals 64. So to get rid of the squared, I need to square root 64, remembering the plus or minus out the front. So the square root of 64 is 8. So it's a plus and a minus 8 is my solution for w. Question 2, h squared is equal to negative 4.8. Well, perhaps you can see straight away I want to square root a negative 4.8. And remember we said as soon as there's a negative sign here underneath the square root sign, we're not going to be able to get a solution. So this will have no solution to this equation. Okay. Question 3, k squared equals 1.44. So let's get k by itself. So I need to square root 1.44, remembering the plus or minus. Square root of 1.44 is, it's a decimal, but it is an exact decimal, so we can write 1.2 and there's no rounding needed. So there's my solution. Question 4, last one. M squared is equal to 54. Get rid of the squared. I need to put a square root sign over the 54 and the plus or minus out the front. Now this time when we square root 54, we get a big yucky decimal. So this is our exact answer, and I also need to write my decimal answer through 7.3, and that will round up to be a 5. 7.35 would be my decimal answer to 2 decimal places. Okay, so that's pretty quick. Hopefully that went pretty well for you. Keep practicing, and I'll see you next time for some more equations. Bye!